The Santa Ana winds screamed across Camp Pendleton's rifle range that March morning, hot and relentless, turning what should have been a routine equipment test into a lesson in humiliation. 20 of the Marine Corps' finest snipers stood in a ragged line, sweat darkening their utilities despite the early hour. Men from Quantico Camp Lejeune 29 Palms, scout snipers with confirmed kills from Fallujah to Helmand Province. Men who'd made shots that lesser shooters called impossible. Men who lived and
Looks like you've
breathed
been
the
on
craft
quite the
of precision
journey.
fire.
Need a
And
lift
every
to ease the
single one of
load?
them
I
had
could
just
use a
failed.
break. Thanks.
Gunnery Sergeant Thaddeus Brick Callahan stood behind the spotting scope, his weathered face expressionless. 58 years old, 36 of them in the Corps, and he'd seen everything, or thought he had. The new Barrett MRAD lay on the shooting mat, all matte black finish and surgical precision, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum. 1,200 yards downrange, the E-type silhouette stood mockingly intact, the center mass circle pristine and untouched. 20 shooters, 20 failures. The closest shot had landed 8 inches from center. In the sniper community, 8 inches at 1,200 yards might as well be 8 feet. "This wind's impossible, Gunny," one of the shooters muttered, a staff sergeant from 2nd Battalion. "Gusting 20 miles per hour, changing direction every 30 seconds. No one can calculate that fast enough." Brick said nothing. He'd fought in Grenada in '83, been in the first wave into Panama in '89. He'd seen Desert Storm from a hide site in the Iraqi sand. He knew what impossible looked like, and this wasn't it. This was just hard. There was a difference. The wind howled again, hot and dry, carrying the smell of sage and dust from the inland valleys. The kind of wind that made grown men question their abilities, that turned confidence into doubt with every gust. "Break time!" Brick called out, his voice carrying easily over the wind. 15 minutes. Coffee's coming." The snipers dispersed, some checking equipment, others studying the wind flags, with the intensity of men trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle. The Barrett lay abandoned on the shooting mat, its suppressor still warm. Brick remained at the spotting scope, his mind elsewhere, thinking about another sniper another time. A man who'd made a similar shot in winds worse than this, in mountains higher than these hills, with stakes higher than any equipment test. A man who'd taught Brick that impossible was just another word for haven't figured it out yet. The sound of approaching footsteps barely registered. Light, quick, efficient. Then a voice crisp and professional, despite its feminine timbre. "Coffee, Gunnery Sergeant. Fresh pot. Black, no sugar, the way the snipers like it." Brick turned and saw her for the first time that day. Corporal Rowan Adelaide Thorne. Mess hall duty, carrying a tray with 25 cups of coffee arranged in perfect rows. Not a drop spilled, despite the wind that tried to tear the tray from her hands. She was small, maybe 5'2", in boots, with strawberry blonde hair, pulled back in a regulation bun. 24 years old, according to her service record. 6 years in the Corps, all of it in culinary specialist billets. A cook. But Brick noticed other things. The way she moved, economical and precise. The way her eyes swept the range, taking in the Barrett, the target downrange, the wind flags, the frustrated snipers. The way she carried that tray with the kind of balance that spoke to muscle memory and spatial awareness. Small details, important details. "Thank you, Corporal," Brick said, taking a cup. The coffee was perfect, hot, strong, no bitterness. The kind of care that separated adequate from excellent. Rowan set the tray on a nearby table, and the snipers descended on it like hungry wolves. She stood back, waiting to collect the empties, and Brick saw her eyes drift to the Barrett again. Just for a moment. Just long enough. One of the younger shooters, a cocky lance corporal from 3rd Battalion, grabbed 2 cups and turned to his buddy. 20 of us and nobody can hit that target. Hell, I bet even the mess hall cook could do better." Laughter rippled through the group. The kind of laughter that came from frustration and wounded pride looking for an outlet. The lance corporal wasn't being cruel, just venting. But he'd made a mistake. He'd said it loud enough for everyone to hear, including Rowan. Brick watched her face, watched the micro-expression that flickered across her features. Not offense, not embarrassment, something else. Something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Recognition. Like she'd heard that particular challenge before, in another life, from another group of confident men. The range went quiet. That particular kind of quiet that happens when everyone suddenly realizes something interesting is about to occur. Rowan turned slowly and looked at the Lance Corporal. Her eyes were pale blue, the color of winter ice, and there was something in them that made the young Marine take a step back. "I'll take that bet, Marine," she said softly. More laughter. Louder this time. Someone whistled. Another made a joke about kitchen duty. But Brick wasn't laughing. He was watching Rowan walk toward the Barrett with a kind of inevitability that reminded him of watching weather systems roll in from the Pacific. Unstoppable. Predetermined. She set down her empty tray with careful precision, removed her apron, folded it neatly, placed it on the table, took off her garrison cap, touched her hair to ensure no strands had escaped. Every movement deliberate, methodical, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. "Corporal," Brick said quietly, "you don't have to prove anything." Rowan looked at him, and for just a second, he saw something in her eyes. Sadness. Deep and old and carefully hidden. Then it was gone, replaced by something harder. "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant," she said. "I do." She knelt beside the Barrett, and the laughter died completely. Because the way she knelt was wrong for an amateur. Wrong for someone who'd never done this before. Her knees positioned exactly right, her body alignment perfect, her hands moving to the rifle with the kind of familiarity that came from thousands of repetitions. She didn't check if the weapon was loaded. She knew it was. The previous shooter had left it hot. She simply cycled the bolt smooth and efficient, checking the chamber more from ritual than necessity. Her hands moved across the rifle's surface, not with curiosity, but with recognition, like greeting an old friend. The snipers had stopped joking. They watched with the focused intensity of professionals seeing something that didn't fit their worldview. A mess hall cook handling a precision rifle like she'd been born to it. Rowan pulled the rifle into her shoulder cheek, finding the weld point on the stock with zero hesitation. Her support hand found its position. Her trigger finger extended along the receiver, indexed and safe. Then she did something that made Brick's breath catch. She closed her eyes and breathed. 3 long, slow breaths, the kind shooters used to lower heart rate to find center to enter the zone where the world narrowed to scope and target and nothing else. When she opened her eyes again, they had changed, focused, distant. The eyes of someone looking at something 1,200 yards away and seeing it clear as if it were 12 feet. She didn't ask for the wind speed, didn't check the temperature gauge or the humidity meter. She simply lifted her face slightly, feeling the wind on her skin, reading it the way sailors read the sea. Her lips moved silently. Calculations? Numbers? Adjustments? Then she settled behind the scope. The range held its collective breath. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. Brick moved to the spotting scope, his heart hammering in a way it hadn't in years. Through the high-powered optics, he could see the target downrange the center mass circle, 12 inches across, white against the tan silhouette. Rowan's breathing changed, slowed, deepened. The rifle rose and fell with her chest, a slow rhythm like ocean swells. She was timing something, waiting for something. The space between heartbeats, Brick realized. She was waiting for that perfect moment when the body goes still, when the pulse pauses, when everything aligns. The Barrett cracked. Not loud. The suppressor turned the rifle's natural roar into a sharp, abbreviated bark, but the sound carried across the range like a gunshot in a cathedral. Final. Absolute. Brick watched through the spotting scope as the bullet flew. 3.2 seconds of flight time at that distance. Time enough to second guess. Time enough to pray. Time enough to know you'd either done it right or you hadn't, and there was no taking it back. The bullet struck. Center mass. Perfect. Dead center of the 12-inch circle. For 5 full seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The wind returned hot and restless, but it felt different now. Felt like it was carrying something that had just changed. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Brick's hands were shaking on the spotting scope. 36 years in the Corps, and he was shaking like a boot at his first rifle qualification, because he'd just seen something that shouldn't have been possible. A mess hall cook with 0 warm-up, with a rifle she'd never fired before, in wind conditions, that had defeated 20 of the best snipers in the Marine Corps had just made a perfect shot at 1,200 yards. On her first try. Again, Brick heard himself say. His voice sounded strange, distant. 2 more shots, Corporal, right now. Rowan didn't argue, didn't celebrate, didn't even acknowledge the whispers spreading through the crowd of snipers behind her. She simply cycled the bolt, chambered a fresh round, and settled back into position. The same ritual, the same breathing, the same waiting for the space between heartbeats. The Barrett cracked again. Brick watched the bullet fly, watched it fight the wind, saw it drift right, then correct, then settle into its arc. Watched it strike the target. Center mass, 2 inches from the first hole. The whispers grew louder. Impossible. Lucky. Has to be. Can't be real. Rowan cycled the bolt a 3rd time, chambered the final round, and Brick saw something that made his blood run cold. She was smiling. Just slightly, just enough. The smile of someone remembering something bittersweet, something precious and painful at the same time. The 3rd shot was the best. Perfect center. If Brick had to guess, he'd say it was less than an inch from the first impact. At 1,200 yards and gusting wind, that was surgical precision. That was artistry. That was something that took years to develop, decades to master. That was something you couldn't fake. Rowan set the rifle down gently, almost reverently. Cleared the chamber, engaged the safety, positioned it exactly as she'd found it. Then she stood, brushed dust from her knees, and turned to face the crowd of silent, stunned snipers. 3.5-inch group at 1,200 yards, Brick said quietly, his voice carried in the sudden stillness. In 20-mile-per-hour gusting winds, with a rifle she's never fired before. He paused, let that sink in. That's phenomenal accuracy. That's world class. The Lance Corporal, who'd made the joke, stood with his mouth open. No one was laughing now. They were looking at Rowan with the kind of respect reserved for fellow professionals, for equals, for someone who'd just proven they belonged in a club that didn't accept applications. One of the staff sergeants, a grizzled veteran with a chest full of ribbons, stepped forward. His voice was careful, respectful. Who the hell are you? Rowan's smile faded. For just a moment, Brick saw that sadness again rising to the surface, like something drowned, trying to breathe. She looked at the Barrett, at the target downrange, at the wind flag snapping in the hot breeze. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost lost in the wind. Nobody, she said, just a cook. Then she picked up her apron, her garrison cap, her empty coffee tray, walked away from the range with the same efficient stride she'd arrived with, leaving 20 elite snipers staring after her like they'd just witnessed a magic trick they couldn't explain. Brick watched her go. Watched the way she moved the set of her shoulders, the careful control in every step. And he thought about a conversation he'd had 8 years ago at a funeral in Quantico. Thought about a man he'd served with, learned from, respected more than any other Marine he'd known. Thought about that man's daughter, who'd been 16 years old at the funeral eyes red from crying standing at a graveside while they played taps and folded a flag. He pulled out his cell phone, scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. The call connected on the second ring. Stone, came the voice on the other end, rough-weathered, carrying the weight of age and experience. Elijah, Brick said quietly. It's Brick Callahan, Camp Pendleton. I just saw something you need to know about. I'm listening. Brick looked at the Barrett, still warm on the shooting mat. Looked at the target downrange center mass, destroyed by 3 perfect hits. Looked at the mess hall, in the distance, where a young corporal had just disappeared, taking her secrets with her. It's about Ghost's daughter, Brick said. She just made a shot that her father would have been proud of. 3 shots, 1,200 yards, perfect group, with a rifle she's never touched before. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Brick thought the connection had dropped. Then Elijah Stone's voice came back different now, harder, more focused. She used to shoot. More than that, Brick said. She shoots like him, same style, same precision, same ghost. Another long silence. Then, I'm on my way. Don't let her out of your sight. The call ended. Brick slipped the phone back in his pocket and looked at the Barrett one more time. Thought about the impossible shot he'd just witnessed. Thought about the young woman who'd made it look easy. Thought about her father who'd taught Brick that impossible was just another word for haven't figured it out yet. Somewhere in the mess hall, Corporal Rowan Adelaide Thorne, was probably washing coffee cups, prepping for lunch service, doing the 1,000 small tasks that made up her daily routine. Living a quiet life, keeping her head down, trying to forget. But some things couldn't be forgotten. Some skills once learned lived in muscle memory and bone-deep instinct. Some legacies couldn't be escaped no matter how hard you tried. Brick had a feeling that Rowan's quiet life was about to get very complicated. The call came that evening just as Rowan was finishing her shift. She'd spent the last 8 hours in the mechanical rhythm of kitchen duty, losing herself in the familiar motions of prep work and service. Chopping vegetables with the same precision she'd once applied to range calculations. Timing dishes with the same instinct she'd once used to read wind. Finding peace in the ordinary. But peace was a fragile thing, and she'd shattered it that morning with 3 perfect shots. Her phone buzzed as she was hanging up her apron. A text from an unknown number. 7 words that made her stomach drop. My office. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan. At precisely 1900 hours, Rowan knocked on Brick's office door. When she entered, he slid a folder across his desk. Someone wants to meet you, he said. Someone who knew your father even better than I did. The folder contained a service record for Master Gunnery Sergeant Elijah Stone. 40 years of service, multiple deployments, and a handwritten note at the bottom. Mentor to Captain Garrett Thorne, 1989 to 2016. Present at KIA Incident Helmand Province, December 2016. Present at the KIA incident. Brick had said Stone knew things about that day, but present. That meant he'd been there, had seen it happen, had watched her father die. She didn't sleep that night. At 0800 the next morning, Rowan stood outside Building 1133. Whatever waited behind that door would change things. She knew that with certainty. She knocked twice. Come in, Rowan, said a voice from inside. Deep gravelly, carrying the weight of age and experience. Elijah Stone was 64 years old, but he carried it like active duty rather than retirement. 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped silver hair and a face mapped with scars. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless, and they fixed on Rowan with the intensity of a man who saw everything and forgot nothing. Corporal Thorne, he said, standing and extending a hand. Thank you for coming. I'm Elijah Stone. Your father and I served together for many years. He was my best friend. They sat across from each other, the conference table between them like neutral ground. You look like him, Stone said finally. Same eyes, same way of holding yourself, same stillness. Sir, with respect, I didn't come here to discuss my resemblance to my father. Gunny Callahan said you had information about Afghanistan, about how he died. Stone nodded slowly. What did they tell you, Rowan? When the casualty notification officers came to your door in December 2016, what story did they give you? Rowan's throat tightened. Taliban ambush, reconnaissance patrol in Helmand Province. 4 Marines killed in action, including him. Full military honors. That's the official story, yes. Stone leaned forward. It's also mostly bullshit. The room felt suddenly cold. What do you mean? I mean your father wasn't on a reconnaissance patrol. I mean there was no Taliban ambush. Stone paused. Your father was hunting someone, Rowan, a Russian arms dealer named Dmitry Volkov. And he was hunting him because Volkov was responsible for hundreds of American deaths across multiple conflicts. Stone told her everything. About the 2015 ambush that killed 2 Marines. About her father's obsession with tracking Volkov. About command denying authorization. About the unauthorized mission in December 2016. We were betrayed, Stone said, his voice rough with old pain. Afghan National Army officer on Volkov's payroll tipped them off. We walked into a kill zone. Your father knew immediately. He ordered us to fall back, held the line to give us time to withdraw. Last thing he said to me was, take care of Rowan. Tell her I love her. Tears burned in Rowan's eyes, but she blinked them back. We got out. Barely. But Ghost. Stone's voice broke. He'd taken 7 rounds. Kept fighting until he physically couldn't anymore. Bought us the time we needed to survive. And they called it a reconnaissance patrol gone wrong, Rowan said bitterly. Yes, because the truth was too complicated. Too embarrassing. Stone's hands clenched. I tried to fight it, But I was told to stand down, so I shut up, took my retirement, and I've regretted it every day since. Why are you telling me this now? Stone pulled out a laptop and turned the screen toward Rowan. A photograph filled the display. A man in his late 50s, gray hair, hard face, standing beside a pickup truck at a ranch. Montana license plates. Because he's still out there, Stone said quietly. Dmitry Volkov, living in the United States under the name Dmitry Volker. Naturalized citizen. Runs a cattle ranch in Paradise Valley, Montana. And in 10 days, he's planning to sell 50 Stinger missiles to a domestic militia group. Rowan stared at the photograph. This was the person who'd killed her father. Why are you showing me this? Because I need someone who can make an impossible shot. Someone with the skills your father had. Stone's pale eyes bored into hers. Volkov's ranch is remote, heavily guarded. But there's a ridge overlooking the property, 1,700 yards out. One shooter with the right skills could end this. Could finish what Ghost started. You're asking me to kill someone? I'm asking you to stop a man who will cause hundreds of American deaths if he completes this deal. I'm asking you to finish your father's mission. Stone reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook, worn and weathered. Your father kept detailed logs, every mission, every shot, every target. This was his from 2010 to 2016. I kept it after he died. Rowan stared at her father's handwriting on the cover. She reached out slowly and picked up the notebook. Read it tonight, Stone said quietly. Then decide. That night, Rowan opened her father's notebook. The first entry was dated April 2010. Afghanistan. A routine Overwatch mission that had saved a convoy. Her father's notes were clinical professional. She turned the pages, reading entry after entry. Hundreds of them. Each one a life or death decision. Each one a moment where her father had used his skills to protect others. Then she found October 2016, 2 months before his death. Still hunting Volkov. Command won't authorize, but I can't let this go. He's killed too many. If I can stop him, I have to try, even if it costs me everything. Rowan would understand. She has the gift. Someday when she's ready, she'll use it the same way. To protect, to serve, to stop evil that others can't stop. I'm proud of her, prouder than she'll ever know. The words blurred as tears came. Her father had known, had understood what he was teaching her. She turned to the last page. December 2016, the day before he died. Mission tomorrow? Going after Volkov. If I don't make it back, I hope Rowan knows I love her. Hope she understands why this matters. Evil doesn't stop itself. Good people have to stop it. And sometimes, good people pay the price. Rowan. If you're reading this someday, know that everything I did was so you could live in a better world. Keep shooting straight. Keep being good. And if the time comes when evil needs stopping and you're the only one who can stop it, don't hesitate. You have the gift. Use it. Make me proud. Rowan closed the notebook carefully, wiped her eyes, took a long breath. Her father had died fighting evil, had died believing she would continue his work. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. She walked back to Building 1133. Stone was still there, looking unsurprised when she walked back in. I'm in, Rowan said simply, but I do this my way with my father's methods. And when it's done, I go back to my life. Stone smiled, small, sad, and proud. Wouldn't have it any other way, Ghost Jr. Let's finish what your father started. The California desert stretched endless under the late March sun. 3 weeks had passed since Rowan had said yes to Stone's mission, and every day had been a crucible designed to forge her back into the precision instrument her father had trained her to be. The facility was unmarked, accessible only by a dirt road through 30 miles of nothing. An old Cold War training site, Stone had explained. The shooting range behind the sun-bleached buildings was immaculate. Targets at every distance from 200 to 2,000 yards. Rowan lay prone on the shooting mat, eye pressed to the scope of a Barrett MRAD. 1,500 yards downrange, a steel silhouette shimmered in the heat. She'd been in this position for 20 minutes, waiting for the wind to settle. Her body ached. 3 weeks of intensive training had reawakened muscles dormant during 6 years of kitchen duty. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. The satisfaction of mastery. The deep pleasure of doing something extraordinarily difficult and doing it well. Winds shifting. Stone's voice came through her earpiece. 6 o'clock, picking up to 12 miles per hour. Rowan adjusted her hold, made a tiny correction. She didn't respond verbally. She was reading the wind the way her father had taught her. Not as numbers, but as a living thing with rhythm and pattern. The wind settled, just for a moment. Rowan's finger tightened on the trigger. The Barrett roared. Through the scope, she watched the bullet arc through superheated air. The steel silhouette rang. Center mass hit. Good shot, Stone said. That's 23 consecutive hits at 1,500 yards. You're consistent. We can move to the next phase. Stone poured water from a canteen. But Montana won't be like this. Different altitude, different weather, different everything. We need to simulate those conditions. How do we simulate mountain conditions in the desert? We don't. We go to the mountains. Stone pulled out a map. San Bernardino Mountains, 8,000 feet elevation. Similar terrain to Paradise Valley. Your shot in Montana will be around 1,700 yards. We need you able to make that distance consistently. 1,700 yards with a 3.0 weight, Rowan said quietly. Yes, your father's rifle. I restored it. Stone's expression softened. He made a 1,650-yard shot with it in 2015. Afghanistan. I was his spotter. Impossible shot. But he made it. You're his daughter. You can make it too. Show me the rifle. Stone led her to a concrete building. Inside, he worked the combination on a gun safe and reached for a single rifle. The Remington 700 looked exactly as Rowan remembered from her childhood. The walnut stock worn smooth, where her father's hands had gripped it thousands of times. The blued steel barrel showing the patina of age. But Stone had kept his word. A modern Night Force scope sat in precision rings. The trigger replaced with a match-grade unit. New barrel with modern metallurgy. Rowan reached out and touched the stock. It was like touching her father's hand. He carved something inside the stock, Stone said quietly. Found it during restoration. Didn't seem right to remove it. He disassembled the rifle and showed her the inside of the stock. Carved in careful letters. For Rowan, aim true, Dad. Rowan's vision blurred with tears she didn't try to stop. Her father had carved this, had put her name inside his most trusted tool, had known that someday she might hold this rifle. When did he do this? I don't know. Could have been years ago. Could have been right before his last deployment. Stone carefully reassembled the rifle and handed it to Rowan. He was right. What you did at Camp Pendleton, that 3-shot group, that was world-class. And you're only getting better. Rowan accepted the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. 1,700 yards, she said. I can make that shot. I know you can, but we're going to practice until you can make it every time. Until it's not luck or skill, but certainty. Because in Montana, you'll only get one chance. They spent 2 days in the desert, Rowan learning her father's rifle like it was an extension of her body, learning its quirks and preferences, learning that it shot half an inch low at 600 yards, but dead on at 1,000, learning to trust it the way her father had trusted it. Then they drove north, trading desert heat for mountain cold. The site in the San Bernardino Mountains was even more remote. A former fire lookout station converted into a shooting platform. 8,000 feet of elevation thin air that burned in the lungs temperatures below freezing at night. Rowan spent 7 days in those mountains, shooting from dawn until her hands were too cold to feel the trigger. Stone was relentless, pushing her to shoot in conditions that seemed impossible. Snow squalls, fog, darkness, wind that gusted so hard it threatened to blow her off the platform. And slowly, painfully, she began to master it. Began to understand how her father's rifle performed in mountain conditions. Began to read the complex wind patterns. Began to make shots at 1,700 yards, not occasionally, but consistently. On the 6th day, Stone introduced the final complication. Time pressure. In Montana, you'll have about 15 minutes to make your shot. Volkov will come out to inspect the missiles. He's paranoid about quality control, but he won't stay exposed long. He set a timer for 15 minutes and started it. Target is marked. Distance is 1,710 yards. Wind is 8 miles per hour variable. You have 14 minutes, 45 seconds. Clock's running. Rowan settled behind her father's rifle, her heart rate spiking from the artificial pressure. She forced herself to slow down. Rushed shots were missed shots. She ranged the target, checked the wind, made her calculations, dialed the scope, settled into position, controlled her breathing, found the space between heartbeats, squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled. The bullet flew. 4 full seconds of flight time. Then the distant clang of steel. Hit, Stone called. Center mass. Time remaining 11 minutes, 20 seconds. Do it again. They repeated the drill 30 times over 2 days. Sometimes Rowan made the shot on the first try. Sometimes it took adjustments, but she always made it within the time limit. On the 7th day, Stone called a halt to training. They sat on the shooting platform as the sun set behind the peaks, turning the sky orange and purple and gold. You're ready, Stone said finally. I've trained a lot of snipers over 40 years. You're in the top 5 I've ever worked with. And considering who your father was, that's saying something. Rowan watched the light fade from the mountains, thinking about what came next. I've never shot anyone, she said quietly. Punched paper targets, wrung steel, but never put a bullet in a human being. I know, Stone said. And that's the hardest part. Shooting is mechanics, but pulling the trigger on a living person, that's something else entirely. That changes you. Does it get easier? No, and you should be grateful for that. The day it gets easy is the day you become something other than human. Stone was quiet, then continued. Your father struggled with it too. Every confirmed kill bothered him, but he also understood the alternative. If he didn't take the shot, other people died. Innocent people. He carried the weight, so they didn't have to. And now I'm supposed to carry it too. Not supposed to. Choose to. There's a difference. Stone turned to look at her directly. Rowan, you can still walk away. This mission will happen with or without you. I'll find another shooter. The mission has a lower chance of success, but it's not impossible. Rowan thought about walking away, going back to Camp Pendleton, to the mess hall, to the quiet life, letting someone else finish her father's mission. But she thought about her father too, about the last entry in his notebook, about his belief that she would use her gift when the time came, and she thought about the future victims, the planes that would be shot down if those stingers reached the wrong hands, the people who would die, who would never know they'd needed protection. I'm not walking away, Rowan said firmly. This is my father's mission. It's mine now. Stone nodded, unsurprised. Then we leave tomorrow, Montana. 3 days of reconnaissance. Then the deal happens and you take your shot. They drove through the night toward Montana. Rowan dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, her father's rifle cased in the back. Dreams and memories blending together. Montana appeared gradually, the landscape changing from desert to grassland to mountains. Big sky country. The sky seemed endless here, stretching from horizon to horizon. Paradise Valley lived up to its name. Nestled between mountain ranges, the valley was a patchwork of ranches and farms, green fields bordered by rushing rivers, all dominated by snow-capped peaks. Beautiful, peaceful, the kind of place where a Russian arms dealer could hide in plain sight. They checked into a small motel in Livingston, 15 miles from Volkov's ranch. Stone paid cash, used a fake name. Then they began reconnaissance driving, the back roads hiking public lands, mapping the terrain. Volkov's ranch covered 5,000 acres. The main house was a log mansion with panoramic mountain views. Barns, outbuildings, equipment sheds, cattle grazing. To all outward appearances, a legitimate operation. But Stone's intelligence painted a different picture. Underground bunkers from the Cold War. Those bunkers now held Volkov's real inventory. Weapons from across the former Soviet Union. And now, 50 Stinger missiles stolen from Ukraine. The deal was set for March 28th, 3 days away. Volkov would meet with the Montana Freedom Brigade, a domestic militia group. The meeting would happen at the ranch in the open, which meant he would be vulnerable for 15, maybe 20 minutes. Rowan found her shooting position on the second day, A rocky outcrop on public land 1,743 yards north of the ranch house. Perfect elevation, perfect concealment in pine forest, perfect sight lines. She hiked to the position 3 times, learning the route. 4 miles through moderately difficult terrain. 90 minutes at a steady pace. She would need to be in position well before dawn, would need to wait for hours in the cold. On the 3rd day, Rowan made a dry run, hiked to the position in pre-dawn darkness, set up her shooting platform, ranged the target area, calculated ballistics. Everything except actually firing. Wind's going to be the main challenge, Stone told her through the radio. Mountain winds are unpredictable. You'll need to watch the vegetation downrange, look for movement patterns, and be ready to adjust on the fly, one shot. That's all you get. I understand. Do you? Because once you pull that trigger, everything changes. Law enforcement will respond. My team will raid the ranch and secure the missiles, but there will be questions. You need to be gone before that happens. I'll have an extraction route planned, but you need to execute immediately. No hesitation, no looking back. They spent the final night in the motel, going over every detail. Weather forecast, wind predictions, contingency plans. Stone had backup shooters on standby, but they all agreed. Rowan had the best chance of making this shot. Get some sleep, Stone told her as midnight approached. Tomorrow's going to be the longest day of your life. But Rowan couldn't sleep. She lay in the cheap motel bed, staring at the ceiling. The culmination of 8 years of grief and anger, all coming down to a single trigger pull, 1,700 yards across a Montana valley. At 0300 hours, she gave up on sleep. Rose, dressed in layers against the mountain cold, checked her gear one final time. Her father's rifle, ammunition, rangefinder, weather meter, ballistic calculator, water, energy bars, emergency supplies. Stone was already awake, drinking coffee in the parking lot. He looked at her and nodded once. No words needed. They drove in silence to the trailhead. At 0400, Rowan shouldered her pack and began the hike. Stone would follow a different route, positioning himself where he could observe both the ranch and Rowan's hide site. The hike was cold and dark and lonely. Rowan moved by headlamp, following the trail she'd memorized. The temperature was 28 degrees and dropping. By the time she reached her position, her fingers were numb despite her gloves. She set up in the darkness, working by feel. Cleared a small area, set up her shooting mat, arranged her equipment within reach, strung camouflage netting. By 0600, she was in position, her father's rifle on its bipod ready. Then the waiting began. The sun rose slowly, painting the mountains gold and orange and red. The valley below came to life, cattle moving, smoke rising from chimneys, normal life unaware that death was watching from a distant ridge. Rowan controlled her breathing, conserved her energy, stayed still. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Still she waited. At 1100 hours, Stone's voice crackled through her earpiece. Activity at the ranch. Multiple vehicles arriving. Count 15 pickups, 40 to 50 individuals. Looks like the militia contingent. Volkov should make his appearance soon. Be ready. Rowan's heart rate increased, but she forced it back down. This was it. This was the moment 8 years had been building toward. She pressed her eye to the scope, scanning the ranch compound 1,700 yards away. Men with rifles, body armor, pseudo-military gear. At 12:45, a vehicle emerged from the main house. A black pickup truck. It drove to a cleared area near one of the barns. The truck stopped, and 3 men got out. 2 were clearly security. The third was older, gray-haired, carrying himself with military bearing. Dmitry Volkov. Rowan's finger moved to the trigger guard. Through the scope, she could see his face clearly. Hard features, cold eyes. The face of the man who'd killed her father. Rage surged through her, but she pushed it down. Emotion killed accuracy. Her father had taught her that. Volkov walked to a large shipping container on a trailer. His security team opened the doors, revealing rows of olive drab tubes, Stinger missiles, 50 of them. Volkov stepped forward to inspect them, running his hands over the tubes, checking serial numbers. Quality control. Just as Stone had predicted. Target is exposed, Stone's voice said calmly. Wind is 12 miles per hour, quartering from your right. Temperature, 42 degrees. Humidity, 35%. Range is 1743 yards. You have the shot. Rowan settled behind the rifle. She ranged the target one more time. Checked the wind flag she'd identified watching the movement of vegetation across the valley. Did the calculations adjusting for altitude temperature the Coriolis effect. Dialed the scope. Made tiny adjustments to her position. Controlled her breathing. Found the space between heartbeats. Through the scope, Volkov's chest filled the reticle. Center mass. One shot. One chance. Rowan thought about her father. About his final entry in his notebook, telling her to use her gift when the time came. Her finger moved to the trigger. She thought about all the people who would die if she didn't take this shot. She thought about her father holding the line against impossible odds, sacrificing everything so others could live. This wasn't easy. Would never be easy. But it was necessary. Rowan squeezed the trigger. The Remington 700 bucked against Rowan's shoulder, the recoil familiar and expected. The suppressor turned the rifle's report into a sharp crack that echoed off the surrounding pines and faded into the Montana wind. Through the scope, Rowan watched her father's bullet arc across the valley, a vapor trail visible in the dry mountain air. 3.9 seconds of flight time at 1,743 yards. Rowan stayed on the scope watching. Professional snipers always watch their shot impact, always confirm the kill. It was the difference between completing the mission and leaving a wounded, angry target who would disappear forever. The bullet struck Dmitry Volkov's center, mass exactly where Rowan had aimed. Through the high-powered optics, she saw him jerk backward, saw the impact spray, saw him collapse like someone had cut his strings. No drama, no movie theatrics, just the sudden, absolute transition from alive to dead that came with a well-placed rifle shot. For 2 full seconds, no one at the ranch moved. The security team, the militia members, everyone frozen in that moment of confused disbelief that always followed a sniper shot. No muzzle flash, no visible shooter. Just their leader, suddenly dead on the ground, and the human brain struggling to process what it couldn't explain. Then chaos erupted. "Confirmed kill," Rowan said into her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Target down. Center mass hit. Volkov is dead." "Copy that," Stone's voice came back. "Outstanding shot, Rowan. Now get ready for phase 2. My team is moving in." Through her scope, Rowan watched as Volkov's security team sprang into action. Professional training overrode shock. They dragged Volkov's body toward cover, scanned the surrounding ridgelines, started shouting orders to the militia members who were milling around in confusion. And then, from 3 different directions, Stone's assault team appeared. 2 SUVs and a pickup truck came roaring up the ranch's access road, dust plumes trailing behind them. 12 men, Stone had told her. Former special operations. Men he'd worked with for decades. Men who understood that sometimes justice couldn't wait for courts and lawyers and bureaucracy. The vehicle skidded to a stop near the shipping container with the Stinger missiles. Doors flew open. Men poured out in tactical gear rifles, raised moving with the practiced efficiency of operators who'd done this 100 times before. "FBI federal agents, get on the ground now." It was theater, of course. Stone's team wasn't FBI. But the badges they flashed looked real enough. And in the confusion, following Volkov's death, the militia members didn't ask questions. Some immediately dropped to the ground, hands behind their heads. Others stood frozen, uncertain, but not all of them. Through her scope, Rowan saw one of the militia members, a heavy-set man with a full beard, reach for the rifle slung across his chest. "Stone, you've got a problem," Rowan said calmly. Bearded male, left side of the container, reaching for weapon. "I see him. Stand by." But before Stone's team could respond, the bearded man brought his rifle up and fired. Not at Stone's team. At the militia members on the ground. 3 quick shots that dropped 2 men who'd been surrendering. And then Rowan understood. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a militia member defending himself. This was something else, something worse. "Stone," Rowan said urgently. "This is a setup. Repeat, this is a setup. They were expecting you." Even as she said it, she saw the proof. More militia members going for weapons. Not in panic, but with purpose. Moving to predetermined positions, taking cover behind vehicles, setting up fields of fire. They'd known, someone had warned them, and they'd turned Stone's raid into an ambush. "Contact." Stone's voice barked over the radio, the professional calm replaced by urgent intensity. "We're taking fire, multiple shooters. This is a trap." Through her scope, Rowan watched the situation deteriorate with terrifying speed. Stone's team caught in the open between their vehicles, and the container was taking fire from 3 sides. Professional coordinated fire. These weren't panicked amateurs. They were executing a plan. One of Stone's operators went down hit in the leg. Another dove behind an SUV as rounds sparked off the vehicle's hood. Stone himself was pinned behind the pickup truck, returning fire, but clearly outgunned. "We need to break contact," one of Stone's men shouted. "We're getting cut to pieces." Rowan's mind raced. The extraction plan had been simple. She makes the shot, Stone's team secures the missiles, and arrests the militia. Everyone leaves before local law enforcement arrives. Clean and simple. But nothing was clean about this anymore. She could pack up her rifle right now, follow the extraction route, be 5 miles away before anyone even thought to look for a sniper. Stone had told her that was the priority. Take the shot, disappear, stay deniable. But Stone's team was dying. Men who'd come here to stop 50 Stinger missiles from reaching terrorists. Men who'd trusted Stone's intelligence trusted the plan, and that plan had been compromised. Rowan thought about her father, about the entry in his notebook, about his belief that good people had to stop evil, even when it cost them everything. She thought about Stone's words in the mountains. "Your father died so others could live. He carried the weight so they didn't have to." And she made her decision. "Stone," Rowan said, her voice cutting through the chaos on the radio, "I'm staying. I'm providing overwatch. Talk me on to targets." "Negative." Stone's response was immediate and sharp. "You need to extract, that's an order. With respect, sir, you're not my commanding officer, and those men down there are dying." Rowan's eye was already back on the scope, scanning for targets. "I can help. My father's rifle still has rounds left. Talk me on to targets." A pause. Then Stone's voice came back different now, accepting. "Copy that. Stand by." Rowan shifted her position slightly, adjusting her hide sight for a different angle. She'd planned this position for one shot at Volkov, not a sustained engagement. But the concealment was still good, the range was still manageable, and her father's rifle was still accurate. "Rowan, I've got 3 shooters on the roof of the main barn, 12 o'clock from the container. They're chewing up our right flank. Can you reach them?" Rowan swung her rifle toward the barn, found the roofline through her scope, saw 3 men in prone positions, rifles aimed down at Stone's team. "Distance?" She ranged them quickly. 1,420 yards, well within her father's rifle's capabilities. The wind had shifted slightly. She felt it on her face, watched the vegetation downrange, made her calculations, adjusted her scope. The first shooter never knew what hit him. Rowan's bullet struck him in the upper back, the angle from above, making a spine shot devastating. He went limp instantly. The second shooter, alerted by his partner's sudden death, started to turn, started to scan the ridgeline for the shooter. But Rowan was already on him. Controlled breathing, space between heartbeats, squeeze, center mass. He rolled off the roof and fell 20 feet to the ground below. The third shooter abandoned his position, sliding down the back side of the roof and disappearing from view. 3 shooters on the barn roof, 2 down, 1 displaced, Rowan reported. "Your right flank should be clear." "Confirmed." Stone's voice carried relief and respect. "Outstanding shooting. We're moving to better cover. Stand by for more targets." And so it began. For the next 12 minutes, Rowan fought a battle unlike anything she'd trained for. This wasn't a single precision shot. This wasn't a carefully planned assassination. This was combat shooting at extreme range under time pressure, with lives hanging on every trigger pull. Stone called out targets, and Rowan engaged them. A militia shooter trying to flank left, range 1,600 yards, hit a man setting up a machine gun on a truck bed, range 1,350 yards, hit 2 shooters using the shipping container itself for cover firing around the corners, range 1,740 yards. 2 shots, 2 hits. Her father's rifle performed flawlessly. The Remington 700 that had taken impossible shots in Afghanistan now took impossible shots in Montana. Each recoil, each spent brass casing ejecting, each target dropping, was a testament to years of training and the legacy of a man who'd believed his daughter could do this. But Rowan was burning through ammunition faster than she'd planned. She'd brought 20 rounds expecting to use one, maybe 2 for confirmation. She was down to 8. "Stone, I'm running low on ammunition," she reported between shots. "I've got 8 rounds left. Make them count." "Copy that." "We're almost clear. The militia is breaking. Most of them are running. Just a few hardliners left." Through her scope, Rowan could see Stone was right. The coordinated ambush had fallen apart once the invisible sniper started picking off shooters. The militia members who'd been so confident minutes ago were now fleeing toward their vehicles, desperate to escape. Only a handful remained, and they were trapped behind cover, afraid to move. "Rowan, I need one more shot," Stone said. "There's a shooter in the ranch house, second floor center window. He's got an elevated position, and he's keeping us pinned. Range is 1,810 yards, Rowan said, already having ranged the window. "I see him." This was the shot that would define whether she truly was her father's daughter. 1,800 yards with a .308 Winchester was pushing the absolute limits of the cartridge. Her father had made a 1,650-yard shot. This was 160 yards farther. The bullet would be subsonic by the time it reached the target. The arc would be extreme. The wind over that distance would be unpredictable. Every variable was stacked against her. But she'd been trained for this. By her father on a Wyoming ranch. By Stone in the California desert. In the San Bernardino Mountains. By years of practice that had carved the muscle memory so deep it was instinctual. Rowan ranged the target 3 times to be certain. Checked the wind at every visible indicator across the valley. Did the calculations in her head double-check them, trusted them. Dialed the scope to what felt like an impossible elevation. Adjusted her position to account for the extreme angle. Controlled her breathing until her heart rate dropped to 55 beats per minute. Found the space between heartbeats. Squeezed the trigger. 4.3 seconds of flight time. Rowan watched through the scope as her father's bullet flew across the Montana Valley. Watched it arc so high it seemed to hang in the air. Watched it fall and fall and fall. And watched it strike the shooter in the ranch house window, dead center. The man dropped from sight. "Target down," Rowan said quietly. "Jesus Christ," someone on Stone's team said over the radio. "Did she just make an 1,800-yard shot?" "She did," Stone said, and Rowan could hear the pride in his voice. "She's Ghost's daughter. Now move, people. Secure the area. Zip tie the survivors. We need to be gone in 5 minutes." Rowan watched through her scope as Stone's team moved efficiently through the compound. The militia members who'd tried to fight were dead or wounded. The ones who'd run were gone. The few who remained surrendered immediately when confronted with the professional operators. Within 3 minutes, Stone's team had secured the Stinger missiles, zip-tied 7 militia members, and collected intelligence from Volkov's body and the ranch house. "Rowan, we're clear," Stone said. "Excellent work. Break down your rifle and move to Extraction Point Bravo. I'll meet you there in 45 minutes. Local law enforcement will be here in less than 20. You need to be gone." Rowan didn't need to be told twice. She was already breaking down her father's rifle, moving with practice speed. Stock separated from action. Bolt removed. Scope detached. Everything fitting into the pack she'd carried up the mountain. She policed her brass. All 20 spent casings collected and pocketed. The shooting mat rolled and secured. The camouflage netting folded. Within 4 minutes, there was no evidence that anyone had ever been on this rocky outcrop. Rowan shouldered her pack and began the 5-mile hike to Extraction Point Bravo, a different location than the original plan. She moved fast, but carefully staying in the tree line, avoiding open areas. Behind her, she could already hear sirens in the distance. Park County Sheriff's Department, responding to reports of gunfire at the Volker Ranch. They'd find Volkov's body. They'd find the Stinger missiles. They'd find 7 militia members zip-tied and babbling about federal agents and an invisible sniper. But by the time they sorted out what had actually happened, Rowan and Stone would be in Wyoming, then Colorado, then gone. The hike took 70 minutes of hard pushing. When Rowan finally reached Extraction Point, Bravo, a dirt road turnout 20 miles from the ranch, Stone was waiting. His pickup truck idled in the shade, and he stood beside it, with a first aid kit open, bandaging a shallow cut on his forearm. "You hit?" Rowan asked immediately. "Graze. I'll live." Stone looked at her, his pale gray eyes intense. Rowan, what you did back there? I've been in this business for 40 years, seen some incredible shooting. But that was something else. That was legend level. 8 targets at ranges from 1,300 to 1,800 yards, under combat conditions, with time pressure, all hits. He shook his head slowly. Your father would be so goddamn proud. Rowan felt her throat tighten. She'd killed 9 people today. 9 human beings who'd woken up this morning not knowing it was their last day. She'd taken their lives from 1,700 yards away, and they'd never even seen her. It didn't feel glorious. It felt heavy. How's your team? She asked, changing the subject. 2 wounded, neither critical. Everyone else is fine. The militia took the worst of it. 12 dead, 7 captured. Volkov's security team all dead, and Volkov himself, of course. Stone closed the first aid kit. You saved lives today, Rowan. My operators and everyone who would have died if those stingers had reached the wrong hands. Don't forget that. They climbed into the truck. Stone drove carefully, staying just at the speed limit, looking like any other Montana rancher heading home. Behind them, Paradise Valley was swarming with law enforcement. FBI would be there within hours. ATF, Homeland Security, everyone who had jurisdiction over domestic terrorism and weapons trafficking. And they'd find exactly what Stone wanted them to find. Evidence of Volkov's arms-dealing network, intelligence on the Montana Freedom Brigade, financial records, communications, everything needed to dismantle the entire operation. What'll they tell the media? Rowan asked as they crossed into Wyoming. Same story we planned. Anonymous tip led to a raid, shootout with militia members, Volkov and several militia members killed. Stinger missiles recovered. FBI will get the credit, which is fine. They'll claim it was part of a long-term investigation, which isn't entirely false. They've been watching Volkov for years. Stone glanced at her. Your involvement will never be mentioned. You're a ghost, just like your father. They drove through the afternoon and into the evening, stopped at a small town in Wyoming for gas and food, paying cash, leaving no trail. By midnight, they were in Colorado. By dawn, they were crossing into New Mexico. They ditched Stone's truck at a rest area outside Albuquerque, wiping it down thoroughly. A different vehicle waited for them, registered to a different name. They drove that one to Texas, ditched it too, picked up another. Changing vehicles, changing license plates, staying anonymous and invisible. 4 days after the shooting, Rowan walked back onto Camp Pendleton, wearing her utilities, looking like she'd never left. Stone had handled her leave paperwork backdated. Everything created a paper trail that showed she'd been visiting family in Oregon. Anyone who asked would find documentation. Her sergeants would remember approving her leave. The system would reflect everything as normal. Because that's what happened when you had 40 years of connections in the special operations community. You could make a Marine disappear for a week, and no one would question it. Rowan returned to the mess hall, returned to prepping vegetables and timing dishes, and maintaining the routine of kitchen duty. But something had changed. She'd changed. You couldn't kill 9 people and remain the same person. That night alone in her barracks room, Rowan opened her father's notebook and turned to a blank page in the back. She pulled out a pen and wrote her first entry. March 28th, 2024. Paradise Valley, Montana. Primary target, Dmitry Volkov, 1,743 yards, 1 shot confirmed kill. Additional targets, 8 militia members, ranges 1,300 to 1,800 yards, all confirmed kills. Mission success. 50 Stinger missiles secured. Father's mission completed. I understand now why he did what he did, why he carried this weight. Not because it was easy, because it was necessary. I am my father's daughter, Ghost Jr. She closed the notebook and put it away with her father's. 2 generations of warriors. 2 generations of ghosts protecting people who would never know they needed protection. Rowan lay in her rack and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd go back to the mess hall. Tomorrow she'd be just another cook. But tonight, she let herself remember. Remember her father's face when he taught her to shoot. Remember Stone's pride after that impossible shot. Remember what it felt like to finish something 8 years in the making. Tomorrow she'd be nobody again, just a cook. But tonight, she was Ghost's daughter. And that was enough. 2 weeks after Paradise Valley, the news cycle had moved on. The Montana militia shootout made headlines for 3 days before being displaced by a presidential scandal. and a natural disaster in the Midwest, which was exactly how Stone had predicted it would go. The official story held: FBI investigation into domestic terrorism. Anonymous tip led to raid on Volker Ranch. Shootout with Montana Freedom Brigade militia members. Dmitry Volker, identified as Russian arms dealer. Dmitry Volkov, living under false identity, killed along with 12 militia members. 50 Stinger missiles recovered. 7 militia members arrested and charged with federal terrorism offenses. The story was clean, simple, heroic in the right way. No mention of off-books special operations teams. No mention of a 24-year-old Marine corporal who'd made impossible shots from a ridge 1,700 yards away. Rowan read the news articles on her phone during breaks in the mess hall. Read about the FBI agents who'd risked their lives to stop a domestic terror plot. Read about the investigation that had taken years to build the case. Read about the heroic raid that had saved countless lives. None of it was true, but all of it was necessary. She was wiping down prep tables on a Tuesday morning when Gunnery Sergeant Callahan appeared in the mess hall doorway. He caught her eye and gestured with his head. "Follow me." They walked to his office in silence. Once inside, door closed, Brick turned to face her. "I got a call from someone at JSOC," he said quietly. "Couldn't give me details. Wouldn't say what it was about. But he made a point of telling me that a certain operation in Montana 2 weeks ago was successful beyond all expectations. That the operator involved performed at a level rarely seen. That her father would be proud." Rowan said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't confirm or deny. "I'm not asking questions," Brick continued. "I don't need to know, but I do need to tell you something." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thin folder. "This came through official channels yesterday. Amendment to Captain Garrett Thorne's service record. Effective immediately, his death in December 2016 has been reclassified from KIA during routine combat operations to KIA during special operations mission. Silver Star, posthumously awarded. Full honors recognition." Rowan felt her throat tighten. They corrected it. Someone with serious juice made it happen. Can't change the whole truth, but they fixed what they could. Your father's record now reflects that he died doing something important. Something that mattered. Brick slid the folder across the desk. "Thought you'd want to see it." Rowan opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was her father's updated service record. New commendations. Updated KIA circumstances. The words Special Operations Mission in place of Reconnaissance Patrol. Not the whole truth, but closer. "Thank you, Gunny," she managed to say. "Don't thank me. I didn't do it." Brick's expression softened slightly. "But whoever did wants you to know that ghosts don't go unremembered, even when their missions stay classified." 3 days later, Rowan received a text from an unknown number. Just a date, time, and building number, nothing else. She showed up at the specified time, dressed in utilities. The building was another nondescript admin structure on the edge of base. Inside a conference room. And inside that room, Elijah Stone. Also present Brick Callahan and 4 men Rowan didn't recognize. All of them older 40 to 65. All of them with the bearing of career military. All of them wearing suits rather than uniforms. "Corporal Thorne," Stone said formally. "Thank you for coming. These gentlemen are from Joint Special Operations Command. They'd like to speak with you about your performance during a recent operation." One of the suited men stepped forward. Silver hair, intense eyes, the kind of face that made 4-star generals nervous. "Corporal Thorne, I'm going to be direct. What you did in Montana was extraordinary. 9 confirmed kills at extreme range under combat conditions, with a platform that most snipers wouldn't trust past 1,000 yards. You saved American lives. You stopped a credible domestic terror threat. You did it with 0 collateral damage and 0 witnesses." He paused. "Let that sink in. We'd like to offer you a position. Not in the Marines. Something different. Something that doesn't officially exist. You'd work with small teams on sensitive operations. You'd use the skills your father taught you. You'd do what he did. Protect people from threats they'll never see." Rowan looked at Stone. He gave her a small nod. "Your choice." She thought about it. Thought about becoming what her father had been, a ghost, an invisible protector, someone who took impossible shots and disappeared. It would mean leaving the mess hall, leaving the quiet life, embracing the legacy she'd spent 6 years running from. "Sir," Rowan said carefully, "I appreciate the offer, but I need to decline." The suited man raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "Because my father spent his entire life in the shadows, doing important work that no one knew about, carrying weight that no one understood, and it killed him." Rowan met his eyes steadily. "I finished his mission. I stopped Volkov. I did what needed to be done. But I'm not going to spend my life doing it. I'm not going to become him." "You already are him," the man said quietly. "The moment you pulled that trigger, you became exactly what he was. A warrior who does what's necessary when no one else can." "Maybe," Rowan acknowledged, "but I can be that when it's truly necessary and still have a life. I can be a cook who knows how to shoot instead of a shooter who pretends to be normal. My father never had that balance. I'm going to find it." The suited man studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I respect that, but the offer remains open. If you ever change your mind, Master Gunstone knows how to reach us." "Thank you, sir." The men filed out, leaving Rowan alone with Stone and Brick. Stone pulled out a small wooden box from his bag and set it on the conference table. "This is for you," he said. "Open it." Inside the box, nestled in velvet, was a Navy cross. The citation card beside it read simply, "For extraordinary heroism in combat operations against enemies of the United States. Details classified." "It's not official," Stone said. "Can't be. You don't officially exist in any records related to Paradise Valley. But in the community that matters, in the world of people who do what we do, you've been recognized. Your father's colleagues know what you did. They know you finished what he started. They know you're worthy of the legacy." Rowan picked up the medal, feeling its weight. Her father had earned a Silver Star. She'd earned a Navy Cross for finishing his mission. In a way, they'd completed the work together. Father and daughter, separated by 8 years, and death itself, but unified in purpose. "Keep it somewhere safe," Stone said. "Someday, when you're old and retired, when the missions are long past, and the secrets can finally be told, you'll want to remember that you made a difference, that you were one of the good ones who are." 6 months later, Rowan stood at her father's grave in Quantico. The headstone had been updated with his new commendations. Silver Star, Purple Heart, the words Special Operations in the inscription. She placed her hand on the cool marble and spoke quietly. "I did it, Dad. Finished what you started. Stopped Volkov. Used your rifle, your methods, everything you taught me. Stone was there. He said you'd be proud." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. Somewhere nearby, a bugler was practicing taps, the mournful notes carrying across the graves of warriors who'd given everything. "I got offered a job. The kind of job you had. Doing the work no one knows about. I said no. Hope you understand. I need to be more than just a shooter. Need to have a life beyond the scope." She was quiet for a moment, then continued. "But I'm keeping your rifle, keeping your notebook. And if the time comes again, if there's another Volkov, another mission that only I can do, I'll be ready. Because you trained me right. You gave me the gift, and I won't waste it." Rowan stood, brushed dirt off her knees, and walked back toward the parking lot. Behind her, the grave of Captain Garrett Ghost Thorne stood silent and proud among thousands of others who'd served with honor. But he wasn't really there. Ghosts didn't stay in graves. They lived on in the people they'd trained, in the lessons they'd taught, in the missions they'd started, and others had finished. Back at Camp Pendleton, Rowan returned to the mess hall, returned to prep work and cooking and the rhythm of daily service. But twice a week, in the early mornings before her shift, she went to the rifle range. And she taught. Young Marines fresh out of boot camp learning basic marksmanship. She showed them proper stance, proper breathing, proper trigger control. The fundamentals her father had taught her on a Wyoming ranch. Most of them would never need to shoot beyond 300 yards. Most of them would never see combat. But some would. And those who did would remember the patient corporal from the mess hall who taught them that shooting wasn't about power or violence. It was about precision and discipline, and the responsibility to use force only when necessary. One morning, a female private first class approached her after a session. "Corporal Thorne, I heard a story, rumor really, that you once made an impossible shot at the range, outshot 20 elite snipers. Everyone says it's bullshit, but I wanted to ask, is it true?" Rowan looked at the young woman, saw herself at that age, full of questions and potential, and the desire to prove herself in a world that doubted women could shoot. "Want to know a secret, Private?" Rowan said quietly. "There's no such thing as an impossible shot. There's only shots you haven't figured out yet. Your father teach you anything about shooting? No, Corporal. He wasn't around much. That's okay. I'll teach you. Same way my father taught me. And if you practice hard enough, long enough, with enough discipline, you'll make shots that other people call impossible. And you won't do it to prove anything to anyone. You'll do it because when the moment comes, someone's life might depend on you being ready." The private smiled. "Yes, Corporal. I'd like that." They walked to the range together as the sun rose over Camp Pendleton. Behind them, the mess hall awaited. Ahead, targets waited at distances from 100 to 1,000 yards. Rowan picked up a rifle, chambered a round, and settled into position. She thought about her father, about Stone, about impossible shots and necessary violence, and the weight that warriors carried so others didn't have to. Then she cleared her mind and focused on the fundamentals: breathing, position, trigger control. The same lessons her father had taught her, the same lessons she was now passing to the next generation. The rifle cracked. Downrange, a target rang with the sound of a perfect hit. "See?" Rowan said to the watching private. "Not impossible, just difficult. And difficult is something we can train for." They spent the morning shooting. Rowan teaching the private, learning, both of them carrying on a tradition that stretched back through generations of warriors who'd understood that the greatest strength wasn't in taking life, but in having the discipline and skill to protect it. When the session ended, Rowan secured the rifles and walked back toward the mess hall. She had lunch service in an hour, had vegetables to prep and dishes to time, and all the mundane tasks that made up her daily routine. But she walked a little taller now. Walked with the knowledge that she'd done what her father had asked. She'd used her gift when it mattered. She'd stopped evil that no one else could stop. And she'd found a way to be both warrior and human shooter and teacher ghost and living person. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Well done, Ghost Jr. Your father is smiling. If you ever need me, you know how to reach me. Stone." Rowan deleted the message and continued walking. The sun was warm on her face. The California breeze carried the smell of sage and ocean. Somewhere in the distance, Marines shouted cadence as they ran PT. It was a beautiful day. The kind of day her father had fought to preserve. The kind of day worth protecting. And if another threat emerged, if another mission required impossible shots from invisible ghosts, Rowan knew she'd be ready. But for now, she had lunch to cook, and that was enough.